just wanted to do a quick refresher video on how to texture a piece of mesh for Second Life with multiple separate textures. It's not going to be very in-depth. I have that in my longer tutorial on UV unwrapping and texturing, and I'll link to those in the description. But this is just in case someone out there is new to doing this and hasn't gotten the hang of it, or just wants to know quickly kind of how it goes. Because there are a few steps that you have to do in order to be able to place a texture onto some mesh object in Second Life. So I am starting out with the basic new file in Blender, the basic cube. Right now I'm in object mode. I'm gonna hit tab key to go into edit mode, and at the top of the screen, top left, I'm gonna go into face select mode. It's the third button, face select, and then that's gonna let me left click and select different faces of my mesh. Now on the right side of the screen, I'm going to look here in the properties panel, and pull this out a bit here. I'm going to go to the materials tab, and as you can see, there's already a default material slot here. Materials and textures are two different things or concepts that I would talk about in more detail in my UV unwrapping and texturing video. But for now, all you need to know is that each face of the mesh that you want to be able to put a texture onto in Second Life needs to be assigned to a material slot. So since there's a default one here, I'm going to hit tab, go into object mode, hit the minus button here on the right side of this window to delete that default texture, just so I can tell you how to get started. I'm going to hit tab and go back into edit mode. I'm going to start with my top face, left click to select it, and I'm going to go back to the right here in the materials tab and hit the plus sign to add a new material slot. Then you need to hit the new button, and you can then rename it, and I'm going to call it face 1. Hit enter, and this is the most important part. This is something I skipped when I was learning how to do this. You have to hit the assign button once you've created the new material slot and you have the face selected, because that will then link this face over to this specific slot. And each material slot essentially holds properties and settings for what kind of texture you want to create. So I'll talk more about that in another video, but for now, just know that you need to always hit the assign button, or else your texture could show up distorted in Second Life. So now I want to choose another face, hit the plus button over here on the right side of the panel, click the new button, and then name it face 2, hit enter, and click assign. I'm going to choose a third one, hit the plus sign to add, click the new button, and then call it face 3, hit enter, and click assign. And then I'm going to go and add a fourth, plus button, click new, rename it to face 4, hit enter, and click assign. And then I'm going to do plus button, click the new button, call it face 5, hit enter, click assign. And the last one on the bottom, I'm going to hit the plus button, click new, and click assign, enter, or hit enter, and then click assign. And now you can see that when you select a different face, it goes to a different slot. So we're all set with that. Next, I want to, in the right side of the screen here, hover over the right upper corner of the properties window until my cursor turns into a plus or a cross. Left click, hold down, and drag a new window out in the bottom here. And over on the left, click the hamburger, choose UV editor to open the UV editor, control my middle mouse wheel to zoom in to the UV map. I talk about UV map more detail in my longer tutorial that I will link to, but this is where you lay out your faces, and you have to make sure that they are laid out properly so that your texture will show up. the right way mapped out in Second Life. Now, Blender will put a default UV layout for you in the editor on the map. If you don't want that, then I'll show you how to sort of create a quick layout on your own. At the top left of the screen, choose Edge Select in the middle here so that I can select edges now instead of faces. And since this is a cube, I'm just going to put marks or mark seams where I want Blender to cut this cube open to lay out these faces. So I'm going to choose left click and click one edge here, hold shift button and add this edge, hold shift button and left click to add the third edge. And then I'm going to right click and hit mark seam. And then that just tells Blender where to cut. And then I'm going to choose this edge here, right click, click mark seam so that this row of faces can open up. And then the bottom, I'm going to do another 3 edges, holding shift, left click, and then right click and click mark seam. Now, I've told Blender, you can see the highlighted purple areas, where to cut to open this cube to make it flat. And over on the right, you can see that it's basically the same setup that was there. Over in the UV editor, you can left click. There's still the same modes here, vertex, edge, face select, and island select to be able to select these faces over here. I'm going to hit S to scale it down just a bit. And then if I wanted to move it, I could hit G and then move it wherever I want. I'm going to leave it as is. And then the last step is to create a new image over this UV map area. So in this window, go to Image, New, leave everything default for now. I'm going to call it Cube UV Map. And I like to make this white, even though it doesn't matter right now. Uncheck Alpha because I don't want it to be transparent. Click OK. And I'm going to hold Control and zoom out on my mouse wheel here so I can see this. And now it's officially ready to take texture. So to export, I'm going to hit Tab to go into object mode at the right top left of my screen. Go to File, Export, Collada. And I'm going to save my cube, call it Mesh Cube. And then on the right side of the Save window here, this is important. If you only want to export your cube and you don't want to bring any other miscellaneous objects from your scene, if you have multiple, click Selection Only so that it will export only what you have selected and export Collada. Now, over in SL, I'm going to, in my inventory window or at the top of the screen in Build menu, upload the model, Mesh Cube, click Open. I'm going to leave the upload settings default. I will do another video on making LODs. Click Calculate Weights and Fee, Upload, and res the cube, which appears to be taking a minute to res. Let's try it again. Now it resed 2 because it was lagging. Delete. Okay, now I'm going to, So I'm going to show you how to put different textures on this cube. So by default, the color is gray because I didn't change anything on the material slots settings like the color or anything in Blender. So I always like to just make sure this is white. And then open the texture window here and I'm going to search for a set of textures that I have just to show you how each face is a different texture. So let me start with a blank. So in order to put a separate texture on each face, go into Select Face option here in the Build menu, left click on the face you want to put a texture onto, and you can drop it on that way. Select the top face, do the same thing. And go all the way around. doing that. And as you can see, you can just go all the way around the cube and put different textures on. To save time, I won't do all 6, but you get the hang of it after you learn it a few times, and hopefully this helps if you're having trouble. Also, if you want to just preview a texture and you don't want to pay to upload it, but it's on your computer, go to the texture window, click local, because right now it's on inventory, which means it will take textures from my inventory. But if you want to check out a texture before you upload it, click local, and then you would click add, and then you could just browse your computer for textures you have on your computer, and it will preview the texture on your mesh in-world before having to pay to upload it. So that's that. I hope this was helpful. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that every mesh object in Second Life can only hold 8 material slots or 8 separate textures. If you want to add more, when you're in Blender, you would need to make a copy of your object, Shift D, this is just to show you, or add another object, and then you can add up to another 8 more faces or texturable faces and material slots. And then if you imported this object as one, which really has 2 cubes, but it's part of the same layer in Blender, you would export these 2 cubes out as one object, and then you'd be able to add 16 textures between the 2. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, see the description for the link to my video where I go into more detail about UV texturing and unwrapping. Thanks for watching.